The idea for Small Creek came from Ipswich City Council. They've been collecting money from developers from a stormwater quality offsets fund. So instead of getting developers to do their own wetlands or fire retention systems on their development sites, collecting that money and doing a project that was a bit bigger and had some greater value to the community and better ecological value as well. Big challenges through the design process were, I guess there's not many great examples of creek naturalisation jobs. And so how do you create places that are really quite natural and stable? There's lots of places around where people just dump rocks into creeks to stop erosion, and that's good from a structural perspective, but they're not really necessarily good outcomes ecologically. So what we want to do here was really think about, how do you create a natural creek? How do you create little places of delight for people to come and explore? And also try to make it somewhere that you can have fish and bugs living in the water and plants that are appropriate to the environment. Design Your Creek Week came from, I guess, a desire to build community ownership around these projects. We know from most creek restoration works around Australia that the ones that are successful have an engaged community that feel like it's their creek, and it inspires them to get out on weekends and pick up litter, pull out weeds and do replanting. And over time, having the community providing that role is it's essential. And so having the community involved in the design from the outset, from when the design was just a blank page, is the best way to get them feeling like it's their project, that they're part of it, and they can look at this whole site and feel like they did this. I'm most proud of the way the community interacts with the site. So most times I've been out here, there's a number of times so far, there's people walking, there's people skateboarding along the paths, and walking dogs, and whenever I chat to them, I never say that I was involved in the design, but it's interesting getting their perspectives and just seeing how much they love being here.
I never used it when it was a concrete drain. But yeah, it's much nicer now.
That's great to be honest.
I use it now, it's got a path.
Yeah, no, we come down here a lot now. We take the dogs down here in the afternoon.
We now bring students in grade 7 and in grade 12 down to the creek to do ecology studies. Having the creek here has really significantly changed the way we teach ecology, because ecology now becomes something that we can see for ourselves rather than something we talk about in a classroom. It gives students hands-on experiences in actual natural areas, and they can really see how the environment can change and how weather can affect that environment. I really like the rock pools. Giving students a space to get right down close to the water where they can really look at the macroinvertebrates and the ecology of the creek was a great idea. I really like the plant life as well, because it just gives habitat and increases the diversity.
My favourite feature of this creek is most probably the creek itself, because all of the flowing water, it just sort of adds a bit of nature to the area and kind of makes the place just that little bit more beautiful. Generally it's school-related activities. On my way home I usually travel past it. My favourite animal that I've seen in this creek is most probably the guppies, though the dragonflies around here also come in close second.
Some really valuable lessons learnt were, I guess, to trust natural systems. So as part of the design process, we spend a lot of time visiting different creeks around southeast Queensland and looking at different features that work in a natural environment. And the best lessons you can get when doing creek naturalisation is to learn from nature. So I think that was some really helpful learnings. The other ones were really thinking about what it would look like on day one, but also what it's going to look like in 10 years' time. And we're now a couple of years into the site. We're just starting to get some trees growing to get some shade, but it's evolving all the time. So I think it's going to be really interesting seeing how the site continues to evolve and what that will mean for Small Creek as a place. One of the things we found when we started the design process is that there's very few good guidelines for how to do creek naturalisation. There are one or two documents that were written about 20 years ago, but they were largely theoretical or based on heavily engineered waterways. And there's not a lot of useful guidance about how to go about doing natural waterways. And so we really wanted to throw out the rule book for this site and just start again and use this as a site to, as a place of learning. So anyone working on creeks can come out here, they can see a whole lot of different creek treatments. So where we've got really quite natural and just earth and channel treatments with plants, where we've got a number of deep pools, rapids and how we deal with rocks and rapids and fish passage, and also reusing concrete. There's a number of parts of this site that get very high velocities, up to about 3 meters a second. And so we've repurposed a lot of the existing concrete to provide armouring. There's also a lot of different landscape treatments that we've used, thinking about how we do edges and vegetation, use logs in the landscape, think about sight lines. And so hopefully that's a really useful resource for a number of landscape architects to be able to come out and borrow from treatments. And what we often see on projects is people saying, oh, you can't do that, you're not allowed to do that. So it's useful having a site people can come and say, oh, they did it and it works. And so I think now, after this site being subjected to quite a number of floods, it's proof that these treatments are robust and resilient. The key team behind the Small Creek project was Ipswich City Council, who provided funding, and also I guess a lot of leadership in terms of project management, and really authorised the design team to do the job in the best way they thought they could. The design team consisted of Bligh Tanner, and Bligh Tanner was responsible for the environmental, civil engineering, structural engineering on the project. And Bligh Tanner was supported by Landscapology, who are landscape architects, and they really provided a lot of the key placemaking and surface treatment finishes that have really made the project sing. There's obviously a lot of skills that you need to make a project like this work, so you need really good understanding of civil engineering and flood modelling. Whenever we're working in creeks, we're changing flood behaviour, so understanding that's really important. You need really good geomorphological knowledge to understand how creeks work, what's happening in terms of sediment movement and erosion. You need to understand plants and plant communities, and also how plants respond in the natural environment. So you need to be able to borrow heavily on natural bush regeneration techniques and understanding how to suppress weeds and how to use shade to your advantage. It's really good community consultation skills to work with the community, understand what they want, what their aspirations are, and how to make sure their design genuinely reflects what the community is seeking in a site. One of my proudest moments with this site was coming out after a major storm event. It was raining at home and I thought I want to get out and see what it's like with water rushing down through the site. And I brought my young son out here, and it's the first time he'd been out here in the rain. He knew a lot about the project because it was something I was talking a lot about at home, but seeing him play around it, and particularly throw sticks into the creek and watching them float downstream and getting so much joy out of that, and playing in the water, and it was great. A great sign to me that the design worked. If it's a place that kids love, then that's the best proof of all.